Hi everybody, it's Franny from Heidi and Franny's Garage, and tonight we're going to be installing a 6-volt starter relay on the 356. So what this is for is there are no relays on this car at all. So when you turn the ignition switch, the power that goes through the ignition switch is what goes and powers the solenoid all the way in the back, which then powers the starter. And that's a pretty decent current draw through that switch. Also, it's a good long distance from the starter as well. So Joe Leoni, who's famous in these parts as being one of the foremost electrical guys for 356s, has come up with a relay that I can install on the back of the starter that'll take the load off the ignition switch. And that's up next on Heidi and Franny's Garage. The kit comes with a relay and the instructions. And Joe has this all set up. He's got all the color coding that you need. He's got all the wires already heat shrinked on, all the connectors. So this should be a fairly easy process to put this thing on. And Joe also includes a full set of instructions as well. I'll run you through the process. We're going to be loosening up 2 screws on the back of the starter. We're going to have to also loosen up the main connections on the solenoid as well, and our line that comes in from the starter switch. That's how we splice in the relay itself. It's going to get mounted to the top of the back of the starter, and then the wiring is just going to splice into the wiring for the starter switch. So step 1 is to remove the ground strap off the battery. The last thing we want is this car hot while we're working back there, because those wires back there are directly connected to the battery. Okay, our first step is going to be to disconnect the ground strap on the battery. There we go, ground strap disconnected. Okay, just to give you a little tour of what we're looking at, this is the back of the starter, and this here is the solenoid. This big cable here is the actual battery cable, and then here there's a strap that goes from the other side of the solenoid to the actual starter. We're going to have to disconnect this, and since we also have to disconnect this screw here and the one on the opposite side, it's probably best to get this off first and get this big wire out of the way, and we'll have more room. Alright, a little rubber booty out of the way. This is a 14 millimeter. Now we can pull this out of the way and stick it over here, I suppose. Just needs to be down and out of the way. There we go. That gives us a lot more room. The screws on the back of the starter casing here, we need to loosen the one at the top and remove the one on the bottom. So I've got a little ratchet to help loosen this up. There we go. So we've got our bottom one out. Now we need to loosen up the one at the top. Alright, so we've got our bottom screw off, and we've got our top screw up here nice and loose. So the relay is going to go on the top screw. We need the bottom one cleaned, and we're going to use it as a ground point. Okay, so I had to fuss with the bracket a little bit, but you can see it up there, and you can see it sort of wiggling around a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and tighten that screw now. Alright, now we have our relay mounted on our top screw here. The bottom screw here is for this ground. So we're going to go ahead and put our bottom screw back on and put our ground strap on. Alright, now we got our bottom screw on and our ground strap on. The next steps are going to be these 2 wires here. So this wire, this big one with a big round clip, is going to go on the hot line here. And the second one is the line we're going to splice into the actual line from the starter switch. Okay, well, I ran into a small snag. The wiring harness was assuming that the connection to the solenoid was going to be a spade connector, and in my case, on my car, it was a ring. So you can see it pictured here. So the problem is I took the ring off of the car that came from originally from the ignition switch. I now have to connect from that ring back into the relay. So you can see down below, I've built an additional little wiring harness to start with a ring connector and go back to a spade. And then at the top, I modified the one that came with the relay and added a ring connector on it. So now my problem is I'm going to have to connect a ring connector to another ring connector. So that's what the little screw is for, and the nut and the two washers. So I have the ring connector that's already on the car, and then I'm going to connect to the ring connector at the below here, which gets me to a spade. The reason I'm not just chopping up the wiring is because I don't want to cut the original wiring on the car. Okay, so this is going to be our connection, and I've got a piece of heat shrink tubing that's going to go over this. Okay, that's nice and tight. Our heat shrink tubing, put that over it. Okay, so we've got our wire all connected here and got our heat shrink tubing on there. Next up, this guy needs to go up to the relay. So it goes up to the very top of the relay. This is the connection up here at the top of the relay that we're trying to get to. This other one is the one we took off that's going to go down to the solenoid itself. Now that we have the wire from the actual starter switch plugged into the top of the relay, the next step is going to take the output and go back into the top of our solenoid back here. That's going to go on the solenoid side, and this is going to go on the relay side. Okay, that's that. An added bonus was that screw was actually loose. Two things we've got to hook up. We've got to hook up our line from the battery and also the line from the relay. So this also powers the relay as well. I'm going to want to make sure this is good and tight. A lot of current flowing through there. All right, that's good and tight. I'll put our rubber booty over this now. Okay, we're all set here. We've got our main connection from the battery here, and there's a line, this one here, that goes up to the relay to power the relay. Then we've got a ground here for the relay on the back side of the starter itself. The relay's here all the way at the top. Great. This line here is our original connection from the starter switch itself, and it's going up to the relay, and then this line comes out of the relay and goes back down where the original wire from the ignition switch went. From the relay, we have the coil ground, we have the coil power from the starter switch, we have our line down to the solenoid, and we have our 12-volt power from the battery for the solenoid. Okay, so now we've got all of our electrical connections made. We're good there. All that's left is to reconnect the battery and give it a try. All right, next step is just to reconnect our ground wire, washers, and our wing nut. Okay, there we go. Okay, here we go, moment of truth. There we go. Yay, success. Okay, so that's a complete success. So the whole point of this was that we want to reduce the amount of current and power that's flowing through this teeny weeny little switch here. It takes a lot of power to initially get the solenoid to fire. So that's what the relay does for us, is it handles the bulk of the load of the current, and the only power now that's running through this is just a teeny amount of current that's used to click over the relay. I feel a lot better. I'm not so worried about my ignition switch. That's a very expensive piece to try and replace. Okay, yay! Super excited. Okay, so we got our relay installed and it was a big success. I'm really hoping that's going to save our ignition switch a bit. I hope you enjoyed the video. It was great fun as always. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel and maybe giving us a like. That would be awesome. So I hope you had a good time. And until next time, safe travels. Bye.